Okay. And it usually takes a couple minutes for folks to roll in. So as folks arrive, we're just going to give it a couple minutes. At some point, I'll start to see a little eyeball icon that tells me how many people are watching. And once we have a solid group, probably after about like 3 minutes, I will hand it off to you all.
So are we all going to go around and like introduce ourselves first and then get into our little spiels? And do certain people want to cover certain topics?
I think that would be good, just so folks know we are live now. So.
Okay.
Do we want to just go in alpha order since it seems to be separated that way? No, it's not. Let's just introductions in alpha order, I think works.
All right, and I can already see 7 people have logged in. Hi, everyone. We're just taking a couple minutes while things get started to help a couple other folks log in, but we'll get started in just a moment. I hope everyone has had a chance to go get outside for at least a couple minutes on this beautiful day. I don't know if it's beautiful everywhere, but here in Amherst, it is gorgeous outside. It's like a nice 70 degrees and the sun is shining with like a nice cool fall breeze. I was personally jam-packed today, but like right before all of this happened, I had just finished 2 back-to-back meetings with students and I went outside for a total of 4 minutes, sat on the bench outside and did a little meditation, and that was nice.
We're going to talk about our little afternoon walks. I live in Philadelphia, which is near Bryn Mawr. And M. Night Shyamalan films all his movies and shows like in the Philly area. And 3 blocks from me, they've turned the entire block into a winter wonderland for his new show, Servant. And so there was snow for like an entire block and like Christmas decorations and wreaths. And it was really, really cool. I've lived in the city for a few years, and it's the first time like something like that has happened.
That's awesome. Just gonna give it like 20 more seconds, and at the 3-minute mark, we'll get started. Oh, we lost someone. All right, so hello to our viewers, students, and parents, I assume. I'm Miss Garrity. If we haven't met yet, I'm the guidance office secretary here at the high school. Those of you who are familiar with the high school can see I'm at the high school. You can see by our beautiful windows behind me. And yeah, so we are hanging out talking about test optional and test blind admissions today with all of the new things happening in our world today. That is one of the things more and more colleges are working towards. So I'm going to hand it over to these amazing college admission panelists to talk a little bit about the project. I will be here. I will not be streaming. I'm a room moderator, so as questions come up, I'll be in the chat and can pop in if needed. But I'm going to hand it over to these folks.
Awesome. Well, I'm Jocelyn Barrientos. I'm an admissions counselor from NC State University. We're located in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Jack Bear. I'm an assistant director of admissions at the University of Chicago, which, to the surprise of no one, is in Chicago, Illinois.
Hey, everybody. My name is Hannah Bruckhart. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an associate director of admission at Bryn Mawr College, which is located in suburban Philadelphia, in case you were here in time to hear me tell my Philly story just a moment ago. And I'm excited to chat with everybody today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Sear. I am Senior Associate Dean of Admission at Hofstra University, which is located on Long Island, just about a half an hour outside of New York City, but I am actually located up in Massachusetts. So I'm a regional representative. So I am up on the North Shore of Massachusetts, not too far from you guys who are tuning in today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ray Vaughn. I'm a Senior Assistant Director of Admissions and Coordinator of Multicultural Recruitment at Muhlenberg College, located in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We are Pennsylvania's third largest city. We're an hour north of Philadelphia and an hour and a half south of New York City, and exactly 4.5 hours away from your high school. So if you ever come to Muhlenberg and you're craving a cheesesteak, like I said, an hour north of Philly. If you ever want to go hang out in New York, we're an hour and a half away from New York. And if you ever come to campus and you want to get away from campus for a little bit, 15 minutes away from campus is downtown Allentown.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. So we're all going to kind of take turns kind of presenting on a number of things that will hopefully address this question of, now that many institutions have adopted test optional or test blind policies, what does holistic admissions look like, and how can you best position yourself kind of in the admissions process? So before we're kind of even going forward, it's probably helpful just to kind of define this term holistic admissions. And if anyone has attended probably any type of admissions visit, admissions session or program, you've probably heard this term before. But essentially holistic admissions means that offices will take everything, an admissions rater will take everything that you submit in your application. So including, your actual application, your transcript, your letters of recommendation, your essays, any supplemental material you may submit. And really, we take everything into account and really kind of create an image of you as both a scholar and as a community member. And then based upon those images, we really kind of render an admissions decision that makes the most sense for you as an applicant, and also makes the most sense for us as an institution with the many priorities that we're always trying to manage. So it's a very intentional process. It's a really kind of rigorous process. Oftentimes many admissions officers will touch every piece of your application multiple times, just because we want to ensure that we are once again rendering an admission decision that makes the most sense for all parties involved. And what's really nice about holistic admissions is that it is kind of custom built for kind of the times that we're living in. It's really, context is king and is paramount in our process, and we're always trying to contextualize the information that students present to us within kind of their environment and within their specific circumstances. So, even in non-COVID years, we're very much kind of all trained to kind of understand what students can bring to our campuses, and kind of what they've kind of the environment in which they've spent their time in high school. So we are just going to kind of continue to take that into account this year. So, we fully understand that COVID has really kind of upended basically every facet of students, families, lives, and certainly even in our lives in admission, we've kind of all been forced to kind of critically think about our policies. And so we fully understand that so many things have been disrupted. Classes have been moved virtually. In some instances, grading scales have been changed. Extracurriculars have likely all but stopped. So we are fully aware of kind of the many obstacles that students are kind of facing, and we're fully prepared and ready to kind of take all of that into account into the admissions process. The one piece that I didn't mention that we know has certainly been impacted is testing. We know many of you have spent years thinking about tests like the ACT, the SAT, the SAT subject tests, and you spent kind of probably many hours, many weeks preparing for them. And we know the hurdles to taking a test right now are just incredible. We know testing sites are being closed down. Students are, if they've had a test, they're having problems maybe taking in an additional time to get a higher score that they think they can get. So we know that students are really kind of struggling to get a score in the first place, or a score that they really think is representative of their intellectual ability. So I don't mean to speak on behalf of all colleges, or even on behalf of all of my colleagues who are in this panel, but I think one of the first things to note is that for those schools that have adopted test blind and test optional policies, which I'll kind of talk about in a little bit, you are not disadvantaged if you choose not to submit testing. And I know you've likely heard that from your guidance counselors, your school counselors, maybe other people, but we are going to fully support and endorse that message. We don't want you to, have to drive to another state or have, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation just to take a test. So that's why many colleges and universities have adopted these policies, because we know that, sometimes tests aren't always a good indication of who you'll be in the classroom. And then beyond that, once again, there's just incredible hurdles to taking tests this year. So please hopefully that can be a helpful lens as we kind of go through this next hour together. Before I kind of turn it over, I'll just kind of define test optional and test blind policies, because they're a little bit different. A test optional policy essentially says that a student can choose to submit testing as part of their application to a specific institution, but it is not required. So it's not a required piece like a transcript or 2 teachers' letter of recommendation at UChicago or 2 supplemental essays, those things that we need to have in order to render an admissions decision. So it's completely up to you whether you have a score and you'd like to submit it or not. Test blind policies are a little bit different. So those are institutions that have policies that say even if you choose to submit testing, they will not take it into account. So essentially, they've removed it as an application metric from all applicants' files. So it just kind of functions a little bit differently than a test optional policy, but some schools are adopting that as well. So in absence of testing, once again, you won't be disadvantaged, but there are other pieces to your application that will be kind of helpful indicators of who you'll be in the classroom and as a community member. And those things just become really important. They were important before and they remain important now. So those things include transcripts, letters of recommendation, your essays, your extracurriculars, as well as supplemental materials. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues to kind of hopefully unpack each one of those and kind of hopefully give you guidance on how you can kind of position yourself really favorably in those pieces of the application.
Go ahead, Rayvon. I saw you on mute.
Thank you for that.
First.
And for the students, I'm happy to have the opportunity to chat with you today. And I'd like to thank your high school for organizing this and allowing myself and other members of the admissions world to come and talk to you about the college search process. As my colleague from UChicago mentioned, test optional is not something that you should be concerned about, or, not having access to the SAT or ACT. There have been a number of schools who have adopted the test optional approach for years now. Some schools are joining the party rather recently as a result of COVID. Muhlenberg specifically, we've been test optional for 25 years now, and we typically we have an applicant pool of about a quarter of students that apply to Muhlenberg test optionally, and then we actually enroll close to under 30% of students who apply to Muhlenberg test optionally as matriculants. That information is out there for you. So if you have concerns about, applying to schools that say, hey, we're test optional, we're test blind, or some of the verbiage that's flying around, look up the schools. They're required to report these statistics to you. So, the data is out there, the information is out there. That's not something that you should be concerned about or anything like that. And then I know for Muhlenberg specifically, due to some of the restraints the restrictions that students have had for the SAT or ACT, starting this year, some of the different merit opportunities that we've had that required students to submit test scores, we've removed that requirement. And now for some of the more competitive opportunities, by simply submitting an application, those are going to be the things that you're going to be able to do to make yourself eligible for merit scholarships or some of our more competitive merit opportunities. I know a number of schools are also moving to policies like that, just because, again, students haven't had the opportunity to look at the SAT or ACT, or rather take the SAT or ACT a number of times to either improve your score or have a score flat out. Some of the ways that colleges are kind of finding ways to work around students not having their test scores is through the demonstrated interest piece, or having an opportunity to chat with you. So at Muhlenberg specifically, we offer an opportunity and we encourage students through each application cycle to come and meet with us, interview with us. Everything is obviously going to be virtual this year. So unfortunately, you're going to be on Zoom for another 45 minutes or so. But, really get to know the colleges that you're applying to just as much as you want to get to know us through the virtual information sessions you've been sitting in on, the pamphlets that you get in the mail probably every other day at this point. We just as eagerly want to get to know you, especially at a place like Muhlenberg, where, we strive off having a strong community on our campus. And the only way we can do that is by getting a sense of the students that we're admitting to our class each year. So whether you don't have test scores or you want to have supplemental pieces added to your application, those are going to be all the things that we consider as we're looking at your application holistically. So each year I have students who send me YouTube links to their YouTube channels or eBay stores or things like that. That's part of the holistic review. We're going to look at anything and everything that you want us to consider as part of your application. So then that way we're able to get a better sense of who you are and a better understanding of some of the different things that you're going to bring to our campus that we typically wouldn't get had we just said, we're going to look at the transcript, we're going to look at test scores and recommendations and make an admissions decision based off that. Part of the holistic approach is looking at everything that the student has to bring to the table. And, you know, if you had a dip in your sophomore year, maybe those are some of the things that you want to discuss in your interview with somebody on our admissions staff, or just simply send us an email and say, hey, due to COVID, I had to pick up another job because unfortunately mom got laid off or dad got laid off. We understand that these are experiences that, you know, our students are dealing with. Then it wouldn't be in our favor to not be understanding of these different circumstances. So by you letting us know and making us aware of these different things are ways that you can not only help yourself as you're going through the admissions process, but also notify us of some of the different things that you maybe have experienced and why we might see peaks and flows in your transcript as we're looking at your transcript to review your academic credentials and things like that.
I want to echo what Rayvon and Jack have both said about not only holistic admissions, but, you know, testing and dealing with COVID. I think the most important thing to remember is that colleges are in this with you. You know, we're dealing with the same struggles. It's just kind of the opposite side of the coin. And I think that, again, I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but I'm assuming everyone, at least at this panel, their institutions are incredibly understanding and are using this holistic process to not only get to know the students, but to really understand where you're coming from. Bryn Mawr has been test optional, not quite as long as Muhlenberg. We've been test optional for about 4 or 5 years. And it's something that has worked really well for us and for our students. You know, even before coronavirus, there's a lot of research out there that shows that testing isn't always a great indicator of your ability to succeed at the college level. There are a lot of other variables that are linked to high SAT and ACT scores that don't necessarily measure aptitude or intelligence. And so by using a holistic review process, we really are able to get a better sense of who you are as a student. And I know that all of our schools are very concerned with community and building community and making sure that you are a good fit for our institutions. I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of these other application components that we've all mentioned. I want to start with the transcript because, again, this is speaking from Bryn Mawr's perspective. The transcript is the biggest part of our application review, regardless of whether or not you're submitting testing anyway. So if you do submit testing, that's fine. It's the last thing that we review, and it really holds the lowest amount of weight in our review process because, like I've said, research shows it's not the most reliable form for us to figure out whether or not you're going to do well at Bryn Mawr. And so when we look at a transcript, Bryn Mawr specifically, you know, we're looking for a few things. We want to see students who have engaged in rigor. So if your school offers AP classes or honors track or anything like that, taking advantage of those classes, engaging in a well-rounded curriculum. You know, I know senior year can be hard because you're done with all your main requirements and you want to take a lot of fun electives, which is great. But at higher selective schools, it's really important to see students that are engaging in math, science, and foreign language for all 4 years. It's not a requirement, like those aren't minimums, but it's a preference that we like to see. And then Rayvon kind of alluded to this, but you know, being able to see students succeed across 4 years, or if you do have dips or challenges, finding ways to address them. So whether that's through an interview, the additional information section on the Common App or Coalition application, or even through a teacher recommendation or guidance counselor recommendation. You know, things happen in life. It's really hard to be a straight A student for all 4 years, and that's obviously not the norm, especially during times like this. I also know of lots of schools that are going pass-fail for a semester, or they're letting students, you know, rearrange their schedules later into the semester. Again, that's totally fine. The more information you give us, the better it is, so we can get a full picture of the circumstances you're in or the specific environment you're in. So I don't want to take up all the time. So I would say transcripts are a huge part of the review, but definitely not the only part of the review. And I'll leave it to my colleagues to kind of fill in the blanks.
Oh, I can go. All right. So I will say, just kind of to add on to what everybody is saying, we're not expecting you to submit scores. We definitely don't want you to go out of your way and put yourself in an uncomfortable situation if you don't already have those test scores. But like, if you already have them, you can submit them if you choose to, is kind of what we're all trying to say. But for NC State specifically, I know I kind of, as everybody's talking, am realizing sometimes holistic can mean different things for different universities. So I would definitely encourage you to look on the university's website to see what holistic means to them and what exactly they're looking for, because some things might be different. Just for example, with NC State, we're not looking for letters of recommendation. That's not something we consider. So just keep that in mind. Not all schools are requiring the same things. But one thing that is different with NC State is that we are looking for interest in the major that you're applying to. So not all schools are like this, but NC State does admit students directly into the major that they are applying to. And so you start right into those classes right during your freshman year here at NC State. So that's one of the many factors. That's just, I'm throwing out an example. Of course, we're looking at your academics and your extracurriculars, your essay and all of that. But just wanted to throw that out there, that some schools might have something additional like your interest in the major, or they might have letters of recommendation or demonstrated interest in the school. So definitely I encourage you to look on the university website to make sure and see what it is that the university that you're applying to is looking for in the applicant. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Awesome. And I echo everything that everybody said so far. Hofstra, we've been test optional for 5 years as well. So I thought we had longevity until I heard from Rayvon, which is awesome. So we're really happy that more schools are coming on board and seeing that this is a really good thing for students, even outside of COVID. I think this is going to be a lasting kind of thing in our realm. So we're hoping for that. We also take a holistic review on applications, of course. I know we all do, but something that I really wanted to delve into that I think Rayvon and Jocelyn, you both mentioned, is demonstrated interest. In the age of COVID, usually the way that you show demonstrated interest is by coming on a tour, coming to meet me at your high school. And this year you can't do those things. So I have a lot of students reaching out to me and saying, okay, I want to show you that I'm interested, but how do I do that this year? So I think that's important to talk about as well, kind of what we're looking at on our end, for a student showing that they're interested in our institutions. Again, every school does this very differently. So you're going to want to reach out and ask, but at least at Hofstra, any little touch point that you make with us counts as demonstrated interest on our end. So that could be that you email me to ask some questions about campus. You may want to set up a phone call, right? It could be that you come to one of my Zoom visits at your high school, or you're attending this event right now. This could count, right? It could be that you're coming on a virtual tour or something like that as well. So make sure that you're searching everybody's websites, seeing what they have to offer, take advantage of those virtual tours, fill out those inquiry forms. It all counts toward that demonstrated interest in the same way that it would have if you were visiting campus in the past. This year is definitely different when it comes to demonstrated interest, at least on our end. So we are looking more so at, what students are reaching out to me. Do they care to talk to me about Hofstra rather than are they making the drive to come see campus? So it's a little bit different this year than it used to be. And I think the same thing goes for extracurriculars. I know your resumes probably look a little bit weird for this year, for lack of a better word. A lot of students have their soccer schedules being canceled because of COVID, and they're not able to be in the school production because of it. So this year I'm seeing some kind of fun things on student resumes, like during quarantine, I learned how to bake cupcakes, and I'm the best cupcake baker in Massachusetts right now, so you can brag about those hobbies, those fun things as well. Just bring your personality to the application. We want to learn more about you, how you're a student leader, if you care about your community, what you're going to bring to our community. That's what really, really matters as part of that holistic review. So yes, your high school stuff is the most important, but outside of that, show us who you are as a person and what you're going to bring to our institution and bring to our campus as well.
It looks like we just have one question, and I don't know if anyone here can actually. It says, for schools that are recently test optional, how has your admissions process changed? Again, Bryn Mawr's been doing this for 5 years, so nothing has changed for us really this year, but I don't know if anybody else wants to add their experience.
Sure. So it seems like everyone has a number of years under their belt, it seems here, which is fantastic. At U Chicago, this is our third admission cycle being test optional. So we're not entirely new to it, though we're newish, I guess you could say. But to kind of echo what Hannah said, and you'll probably get a similar response from other schools, our admissions process hasn't really changed. If students choose to not submit testing, just as they could have done in years past, they won't be disadvantaged in our process. So things won't really change.
I can touch on that a little bit because actually NC State, this is our first year being test optional. So we are definitely new to it. But like everyone is saying, it's not going to change our admissions process at all or review process at all, because it is holistic. So we have in the years past always looked at many different factors like we've been talking about. So we are looking at the academics, major interest, extracurriculars, your background, your essay, all of that. And so if you have scores or if you don't, it doesn't really make a difference on our end because we are looking at all the other factors. Yeah, it's new to us, just like it is new to all of you students, but we're all going to learn together.
And just really quick, I'm going to chime in. For the students, literally, and I don't know what CRMs what the other schools are using, but at Muhlenberg we use Slate. I don't know what you all use, but for the students, literally, when we're reading the application, we take maybe all of 2 seconds to look at the test scores, and it's literally just to add the reading and the math section, and it spits out a number for us. In some cases, in other cases, we have to manually, okay, this is that, and add it together on our own. That's not something that most schools spend a tremendous amount of time on. And I just really quickly want to dispel the notion that, by you applying test optionally or by school being test optional, that does not, make it any less rigorous or anything like that. Colleges are understanding of the fact that, COVID is impacting you all's ability to take exams. So I'm the regional representative, or rather I travel to New England for my recruitment travel each year. And in conversations with counselors, I had a conversation with a counselor in early September. This was back when we were under the mandatory 14-day quarantine period. He has a test taking site up in Vermont, and he had students that were driving up from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York to take the SAT, and he ultimately had to shut the test taking site down. And that to colleges is just like, that's ridiculous. Like there's no need for you to drive 5 or 6 hours to take an exam on a random Saturday morning. So I say that to just let you know that, again, just because you're applying to a school that's test optional, or a school has a test optional policy, that does not make it any less rigorous than some of the schools that aren't test optional or anything like that. Given COVID, everyone is understanding of the different circumstances that you all are dealing with. And that's, again, just not something that I want to be in the front work of your college search process. So this school is test optional, so they're less rigorous. You'll be afforded some of the same opportunities, if not the same opportunities, at any school that you're going to be applying to, whether they're test optional or not.
To echo that, I can take that one step further as well. We've studied our test optional applicants over the past 5 years to see kind of how they do on our campus. And we've actually found that our test optional students retain. So retention means they come back year after year. They retain at a better rate than our test sending students. And many of them are performing even better in their classes than our test sending students did. So it's to the point where we know that test optional students are just as hardworking, if not harder working, than our test sending students. So it's certainly not an indicator of rigor or anything like that.
Feel free to put questions in the comment section. It seems that it seems like a great place if you have questions for you to pose them to us. And I think it's really nice that we're all kind of representative of many different types of institutions. So hopefully comforting that you're kind of hearing the same language and the same kind of perspectives. Looks like we have a question. Looks like it's coming from Sylvia. I'm a junior and I don't know what testing will be like next year. If all the schools I apply to are test optional, should I still take the SAT? I don't know if I actually have a right answer. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this. If you have an entire list of just test optional institutions, which if institutions kind of continue on with the policies that they've adopted this year to next year, which could be probable. It's completely up to you. If you want to give it a go and you have the ability to take a test, you can certainly do that. And I think what's really nice is that, for those students who choose not to submit, and this is specific to Chicago, but for those students who choose to not submit testing, once again, you're not disadvantaged in our process. But if you do submit testing and it is kind of within range of what typically admitted students will have submitted in years past, it does have the kind of ability to, in some ways, significantly impact your admissions decision favorably. So it's really kind of up to you. You won't be disadvantaged, but if you feel as though you perhaps could, get a score that you think is really strong and reflective of your ability in the classroom, it can really kind of be supportive of you and your candidacy. So I don't think there's not a right or wrong answer, but definitely something to think about and also enter into conversation with your school counselors and your family.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off that, Sylvia, I don't know where you are in your college search process, if you have a list or you're kind of have a skeleton list. The school that you're considering, look to see what their test taking policies are. So if you find that, there are schools that you're looking at that still require you to submit test scores, maybe it might be to your benefit to take the SAT if it's possible. No one knows at this point in time, next spring or hopefully in January, everything might be back to normal, hopefully. So we might be able to return to normal life. But in the event that we're crossing our fingers, in the event that we're not able to do that, you could predict that some colleges will continue on the test optional route. But then there are some colleges that also tie merit decisions to access to the SAT or ACT and having those test scores made available. So if you find that you're looking at a school that still requires you to submit an SAT or an ACT in order to be eligible for merit scholarships, maybe it might be to your benefit to take the SAT again if it's available. Like I said, with Muhlenberg, we made adjustments to our honors programs since students don't have opportunities to take the SAT or ACT, but that's not something that all schools may be in the position to do. So again, you just want to look at the different schools that you're applying to and get a sense of what their test taking policies and approaches before making any decision on whether or not you should take the SAT or you shouldn't take the SAT. And then it looks like we have another question in the chat. They're actually flown in right now. Will other parts of the application have more weight? You may have already spoken to this. We all, I think, just in listening to everybody talk, we all agreed that we look at applications holistically. So for starters, your transcript is going to be something that we all look at rather heavily just because we want to make sure that we're admitting you to our institutions and you're able to do the work. And your transcript is going to give us some insight into your ability to do the work at each of our academically rigorous institutions. So we want to make sure that that's something that we're paying attention to. And then we're also going to look at, in most of our cases, I think NC states that they don't require recommendations, but we're going to look at recommendations, activities, so on and so forth. YouTube links, if you want to send it to us. Part of the holistic approach is looking at anything the student has to bring to the table. And if anybody wants to chime in.
That was so eloquently put. I don't know if we can even add to that.
Looks like we have another question from Grant. Do your schools have a formula that you use to weigh different parts of the application, or does it vary from application to application? I think this is school specific. For Muhlenberg, we do recalculate the GPA, and as my colleague Hannah said, we do look to see that over the course of your 4-year college trajectory that you are taking 5 core subjects each academic year. So math, science, English, history, and a foreign language. If you get to your senior year and you're like Rayvon and you just don't like math, you can totally drop a math class, and our hope and expectation is that you're then going to pick up a 5th course that is going to kind of tie into whatever it is you're thinking about majoring in. We don't want to see you in your senior year picking up another gym class or knitting or whatever it is that the different classes you all might be taking. But part of our process that we look at differently is just the GPA because we do recalculate it, and that's to just allow us to get a core view of your transcript, taking out the classes that aren't going to give us real insight into how you're going to perform academically at our institution.
Yeah, and I'll also, I can speak from the Chicago perspective, and I know this is probably the case at other institutions as well, but, everything is, the transcript is most important, certainly. In our applicant pool, typically Chicago receives around 35,000 applications each year, and we're typically admitting around 2,000 students. In that applicant pool, about 80% of our students are perfectly academically admissible. So they have testing within range of what we would typically admit. We have no doubt that they could be very successful in our core curriculum at UChicago and kind of, thrive intellectually in the college. So in that kind of context, everything else does become really important because it really does help us to suss out those students who have knowledge of us, who are excited about us, and then also who are really great fits for us. So in that pool, then things become really important. Things like letters of recommendation, which we do require. Things like our supplemental, our essays. UChicago has one. We require students to complete the personal essay and the common application or the coalition application. And then in addition to that, we have 2 supplemental essays that we ask students to complete. So those pieces are really helpful in helping the admissions officers or help the candidate rather kind of elevate themselves above just other seemingly really competitive, strong applicants.
I think
Sorry.
Go for it, Courtney.
I always like to remind students too that we, at least at Hofstra, we're looking at your application on its own. We're never looking at, student X's essay versus student Y's essay and comparing the 2 of them next to each other. We're looking at your application on its own, meaning that some things on your app may carry more weight on yours than student Y's carries on theirs. Maybe you're stronger in leadership kind of realms, whereas the other student might be more strong in academics, right? So we're looking at you within the realm of your application, not necessarily comparing students against each other in that way.
I was going to say something very similar, so I think we can just move on to the next question, which says, the UC system has explicitly said that the SAT and ACT is biased. Are college admissions offices making statements about how they view standardized tests, or is COVID primarily driving this change? I would say Bryn Mawr has not made any sort of official statement about how we feel about the SAT and ACT. A few years ago when we did make the move to be test optional, I think a lot of that was grounded in the research that shows that the SAT and ACT aren't necessarily a good indicator of student success, and that there's a lot of other variables, especially around socioeconomic status of the student, a lot of factors that are out of the student's control when it comes to testing. I think that's where our decision was really grounded. Again, we did not make a statement similar to what UC did, but we definitely had this push before COVID, and I think COVID has really just amplified the disparities in our country and, internationally for folks, not only access to testing, but, ability to do well on these tests.
Yeah, I wasn't alive when Muhlenberg, or rather, I wasn't going through the college search process, when Muhlenberg was going through their transition to being test optional. Like I said earlier, we've been test optional for 25 years now. So I think by our recognition of the, being test optional for that long, while we haven't recently made a statement or anything like that, I think just our approach with test optional kind of says for itself that we understand the discrepancies that waking up on a random Saturday morning to take an exam at a random high school, probably. I know when I took my SAT, I'm from the Bronx, New York originally, and the school that I had to go to was actually on the opposite side of the Bronx. So we understand that there are a number of different things that factor into a student's ability to score in a certain percentile on the SAT. So that's one of the reasons why we've had the approach that we've had as far as being test optional for as long as we've been test optional. So while we haven't made an official statement, what's kind of implied doesn't always need to be said, I guess.
Yeah, and I can say for NC State, since this is kind of a little bit newer for us, we have not made an official statement either. I do believe a lot of the reason that we have gone test optional is because of COVID and because we know so many students haven't been able to go out and take those exams. So we just wanted to be more accessible for students. This also is a decision that's made by the UNC system. And so we are a public school in North Carolina. So we don't get to make all of our own decisions since we're kind of a part of a greater organization within the UNC system. And so they decided that we are going to go test optional maybe a little bit later than we wanted them to. But, you know, that's ultimately up to them. And so they made the decision to go test optional for this upcoming application cycle, and that's all that they've given us so far. They haven't told us if we're going to continue being test optional in the future. So like they were mentioning before, definitely look into the university website and see if they are going to resume requiring test scores or if they're going to stay test optional, because I can say for NC State, I don't know. I know that we're test optional for 2021 applicants, but I don't know any further than that. So definitely check in with the university to see if they are going to continue with that test optional policy.
Put those questions in the chat, everyone out there. Any other questions?
Just to be clear, the questions don't have to be specific to the SAT or ACT. You can ask us questions about what are the perks of doing an interview? What are the perks or what are some ways we can engage with your school? You have 5 wonderful admissions experts here that, you know, can give you information specific to their institutions, but also some of the institutions that you might be thinking about applying to. I'm pretty sure, I know I didn't go to Muhlenberg as an undergrad, so you not only have the employment experience, but you also have the undergraduate experience that each of us can bring to the table. So no questions are off the table. Feel free to ask.
I'll just kind of, I think kind of this, while you're all kind of brainstorming those fantastic questions, you know, I think kind of also opportunity, while we've talked about, you know, many different types of things that you can and you should be submitting as part of your application. I think also, and I think Rayvon kind of talked about this nicely, but I'd just like to emphasize that it can be really helpful, is kind of all of these supplemental materials that you can be submitting as part of your application. So, you know, when we think about supplemental materials, important to, from the outset, really kind of emphasize that these are almost all optional, always they're optional. So, and, you know, most of the time, especially in COVID, you know, when institutions say something is optional, it is really truly optional. So, you know, please always, you know, take that into account. But supplemental materials there's kind of a beautiful variety of what you can submit. You know, at UChicago, we encourage students to submit things like business proposals or abstracts for research that they've engaged with, or any number of things, music supplements, art supplements. UChicago offers its students the opportunity to submit a 2-minute optional video, which is actually in lieu of admission interviews, which we stopped offering around 2 years ago, largely from an access standpoint. It was just interviews are not incredibly accessible for many students. So that's why we kind of give students the opportunity to kind of submit a 2-minute optional video. But that can be a great way that students can kind of show us in real time something that we might already know, something that, you know, something that we don't know yet that the student thinks is really important in their application. And I've had students, you know, submit really kind of interesting videos. You know, I've had students, you know, submit full-fledged music videos, which have been both incredibly impressive and overwhelming in their enthusiasm for the University of Chicago. I've had a student who was one of 8 siblings, and he had, in his 2-minute video, he introduced me to all 7 of his siblings, which was delightful. You know, get creative in this year where perhaps you are anxious about not submitting a test. Think about those other things that, you know, we don't explicitly ask for, but we all really kind of give you, most institutions give you the opportunity to kind of submit in your application. There was a specific question to UChicago that I can just answer really quickly. How does UChicago track demonstrated interest? Good question. We don't unfortunately track demonstrated interest. So any touch point you have with the university, whether that be attending an information session, taking a campus tour, coming here today, it's really kind of for your own exploration of the college. So we don't take it into consideration, but please take advantage of them. Hopefully taking advantage of both in-person, and when we offer in-person and virtual opportunities, will give you a better sense of the University of Chicago, as well as every other school you're probably interested in. There's a question, anyone want to add to that? I don't know if anyone has anything to add, no? Cool. Question, is a passing AP score going to give me direct credit for the equivalent class? So this is a great question. This is largely very institution specific. So every university college has a different kind of equivalency or conversion chart for AP classes or IB classes. So I would just encourage you to look at the specific schools to which you're applying, and they tend to be pretty kind of clear with what classes will transfer, you know, what score you need on the AP exam for those classes or for you to get course credit for it. But at UChicago, typically we award credit. We do give course credit for AP classes, and typically, with some small exception, students will typically need a 5 on the exam. But once again, depends upon the institution.
I would like to add to this because I know that the original theme of this presentation was about being test optional or test blind. I don't know if this is the case for everybody else here, but at Bryn Mawr, being test optional means that you can also be test flexible. So if you don't want to submit your SAT or ACT scores, but you do want to submit AP scores because you're proud of them or you feel like they really represent you as a student, you can submit AP scores instead of an SAT score or in addition to an SAT score. It's totally up to you. I always say that I see applications where a student submits literally every standardized test they've ever taken. And then I see students who have like, here's my A-push score, like just the one. And that's fine. You know, I will look at it and I'll review it, but it's totally up to you. So regardless of how we award credit, you might still want to submit it just as a test score in general.
All right, so we just have about 2 minutes left. So I just want to thank our panelists for being here and giving us such great insight into the college admissions process, especially in this age of so much test optional, test blind newness. I think we had a great range of folks here from, you know, test optional for 25 years to test optional for the first time. I think, you know, you all have been fantastic, and I want to reach out to the students and the parents and say, if you have further questions about SATs, test scores, anything at ARHS, feel free to reach out to me, Ms. Garrity, or to Ms. Cuffey Gray. If you have questions for our panelists, if you're interested in learning more about their college, more about their expectations for test scores, or just are interested in doing demonstrated interest, definitely reach out to me. I have everyone's contact info. And definitely keep an eye out on those like college visits in Naviance and attend ones that you are interested in. Any last thoughts from any of our panelists?
Just want to share. Go ahead. You beat me to it. Just want to share with the students and the families that are on the call. Don't let the college search process stress you out. I can speak for all my colleagues on this call. We're not here to stress you out. Enjoy your senior year. Enjoy, everything that being a high school student entails, and enjoy the college search process. While it's a little unusual this year, there are ways that you can still engage with the different colleges that you're looking at. I know at Muhlenberg, it feels like we're doing a virtual session every night right now. And I'm sure my colleagues on the call as well are doing virtual sessions and finding ways to, meet you where you are. So engage with us, interact with us as frequently as you'd like. And we're here to help, so if there's anything that we can do to be of service to you all, since you all keep the food on our table and our lights on in our apartments and food in our cats and dogs' bellies, feel free to reach out to us. Let us know what we can do to help.
All right. Well, I'm going to end our broadcast, but it was great to see you all, and have a great, lovely rest of your day.